Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Last Monday, we took a day off because you guys know I've been dealing with something going on here in my sinuses and my lungs and whatnot. Still dealing with it. Still trying to get answers for like what the heck is going on with my body. But I'm feeling well enough to go live today. Also, for those of you that may not be tracking, we also are following the live trial of the love triangle murder trial, so to speak, Texas versus Caitlin Armstrong. I did the live stream of the opening statements, and then I've done recaps for days 1 and 2. Day 3 will be coming out today. I'm sorry, I totally intended for it to come out before today / like morning for everybody in the States. It's going to be coming out today. It's going to be coming out today for sure. 100%. It's almost ready. But it'll be getting out after Classic Trials ends today. And then tomorrow I want to try to get these done faster. So anyway, yeah. So keep an eye out for that one. And yeah. And then also for those that aren't familiar with that case, if you want to, for sure, check out recaps for 1 and 2. If you want to, you can also check out the opening statements. The audio was very low in the courtroom, unfortunately. So it was a little bit frustrating for a lot of people to be trying to follow. We will also be live streaming the closing arguments and the verdict. So folks that are interested, you can track the case with us. And then we'll watch closing arguments together as well, to see how things sort of got wrapped up. It's a fascinating case, obviously a tragic case. There's a lot of pain here. I mean, someone has died in this case, was taken at a young age of 25 years old. Horrible. So anyway, but there's also a lot of like just crazy stuff also that's happened, to include, the defendant fleeing for Costa Rica, getting plastic surgery and getting her hair dyed, allegedly to evade capture. So anyway, so that's just my little plug for that. And if you haven't seen it, be sure to check it out. And like I said, I will be having day 3 out later today. So keep an eye out for that as well. Also, Draco Amy, thank you so much for gifting 1 Legal Bites membership. Very kind and generous of you. Arto Ristonen, you're back in Bite Club. Welcome back. And thanks again to Draco Amy for gifting that one. I love it. I love to see it. So, okay. With that, we are back. Hey, Indy, you're supposed to take your spot. Indy, up. Don't worry, she's still here. She's just been, on the floor. Oh, you are just so cute. Okay, treat time. Quick treat time, and then we'll get into it. All right. Yeah, I don't know why the IndyCam is acting up, but and here comes Mr. Holmes. All right, yes, you get one too. Good kitty. All right, so let's get back into it. We have, of course, More Erik Menendez today. We are like in the middle of it. We're still in his direct examination even. And as I was kind of plugging through to sort of like skip through ads and like, get a feel for like where the timestamps are going to be. I can I can tell I wasn't listening like very long, but as I was kind of skipping through, I can tell we're going to get into some more heavy stuff, more difficult stuff. So, of course, as always, we've got all the same reminders about trigger warnings and everything. We're gonna get into more of it. So for anybody that has a hard time with these kinds of topics, with abuse, with SA, all that kind of stuff, take care of yourself. If you're having a hard time with it, step away. It's not worth it. It's not worth it, right? It's not worth your mental health. You can come back at any point that you are able to. So Mirror Maiden, a trigger warning is definitely in order. Okay. So yeah, we're going to be getting into some rough stuff then. So, and it's going to be graphic. Okay. All right. Thank you for letting me know, Audrey. Yeah. So for some reason, Mirror Maiden's chat didn't come through on StreamYard. That's weird. Also, Draco Amy, thank you for gifting another Legal Bites membership. Caitlin, you have been gifted a membership by Draco Amy. So welcome back to Bite Club. Love to see it. And yes, thank you, Draco Amy, for the trigger warning. We're gonna be putting these up on the screen, as well as information for where you can call if you are having a difficult time with this kind of stuff. So some hotlines and whatnot. So yes, all of that. And, every now and then like I said, we'll be bringing those back up. Okay. So with that, we should get into it, shall we? Okay. All right. Let's do it. All right, here we go.
Opinions about it, and we'll resume at 1:30.
Mr. Menendez, you were about to tell us from your perspective an episode of one of these bicycle riding lessons. Remember?
Yes,
Where did you live at the time?
in Muncie.
And is there a particular day of this that you recall?
Yes.
And would you just tell us what happened on that day?
My dad was telling me that in order to get the bike, I had to be able to ride it. So he wanted me to go down from where the house was, down the hill and around the cul-de-sac and back up. And so he would put me on the bike and he would run along with the bike and push the bike down the hill.
And how? What kind of curve was there on this cul-de-sac?
It was just a circular curve.
Was it a tight curve, a wide curve?
It was a tight curve.
And on this particular day, what happened when he pushed the bike down the hill into the cul-de-sac?
Well, I wasn't old enough to, I just didn't know how to ride the bike very well. And so I couldn't quite get around the curve. So I would just jump off onto the grass. As I remember the first time, he told me I had 5 turns this time, 5 tries. And so the first time to get around the cul-de-sac, I wasn't able to, and I had to jump off onto the grass.
And did you do this again?
I did it the second time. I jumped off onto the grass, and the third, and the fourth, until it was my last turn around my last try around the turn. And
did your father react after each time when you would jump off?
Yeah, he was very upset. He was not angry. I mean, he was very angry when I would jump off, and then he would come back and say, "Do not jump off. Do not jump off. Even if you fall, try to go around the cul-de-sac." And then the last time, he told me that this was the last time that I had my last try that day.
And what happened?
He pushed me down, and I said to myself, I'm not going to jump off this time. And I just said to myself, I'm not going to jump off as I'm going around the turn. And the bike fell because I couldn't ride it well, and I fell down.
And what happened to you?
I cut up my arm really badly.
And were you bleeding?
Yes.
So did they take you for medical treatment?
No.
Did you ever get the the cut on your elbow stitched?
No,
How large a scar do you still have there, Mr. Menendez? Can you show us?
it's still a large scar.
Well, without rolling up your sleeve, can you show us with your fingers?
It's like that.
About 2 inches long?
Yeah.
Now, was your mother home when your elbow was cut open?
She was there watching.
Did she leap from her feet when you fell and run to your side?
No, my dad was very upset that I had actually fallen. He really wanted me to make it around. He told me I could fall, but he was upset that I did.
Was he?
Now, really quick, Dionysia Joclo, thank you so much for adding this number for Greece for any mental health, help. And also Draco Amy, thank you so much for gifting 5 more Legal Bites memberships. So kind of you. Dalabar, Dionysia Joclo, Shibaka Wookie, Jackie Crow, and Christina M. You've all been gifted memberships by Draco Amy. So welcome, and we're welcome back to Bite Club. So thank you again, Draco Amy. So kind of you. Okay, let's continue back.
Was he upset that you were hurt? Was he?
No, he was just upset that I wasn't able to make it around the cul-de-sac.
With whom, if anyone, was he upset?
With me.
And what do you recall he did, if anything, with the bicycle after you injured your arm?
He threw it in the garage, told me not to touch it.
Now, was this supposed to be your bicycle? Was it a new bicycle for you?
Yes.
And were you allowed to play with it in between these bike riding lessons?
No.
Well, the purpose of the lesson was what? When
I'm not sure. The purpose of the lesson, I assumed, was so that I would learn how to ride the bike, but he wasn't really teaching me how to ride the bike. He just was giving me 5 tries. In order to keep the bike, I had to be able to do this turn.
What do you mean?
Which is obviously insane. I mean, not surprising at this point in the trial that he is a completely unsupportive father who's not actually teaching his kid how to do things, but just like making him do things and like setting him up for failure. Surprise, surprise, we're there again. So anyway, yeah.
What do you mean keep the bike?
In order to be able to have the bike whenever I wanted and to use it, I would have to be able to do this turn.
Do you have any recollection of how long it was after this day that you actually made it around the cul-de-sac and could keep your bike?
No, I think it was a few months, month, 2.
Do you know if there were more such lessons as the one you've described today?
Overall.
Yes, there was. And when I finally made it around the turn, that's when I was able to keep the bike.
Do you remember finally making it around the turn?
No.
Do you think that this day is, strike that. Do you think this day occurred in the summertime, the wintertime? When?
I would think it was in the summer.
Now, at this time in your life, Mr. Menendez, when you lived in Muncie, and you were about 6 years old,
Yes.
how would you describe your relationship with your father in the sense of what did you think your father thought of you?
I didn't think he liked me very much.
And why was that?
Because I used to cry a lot, and because I wasn't as strong as Lyle, and I wasn't as good as Lyle in the things he wanted me to do.
And how did he express it? Well, did he express in any way that he didn't like you very much? In your mind?
Yes.
What kinds of things did he do that made you believe he didn't like you very much?
He told me that I was a sissy, that I was a coward, and that I wasn't good enough to be in the family. He hit me. He hit me with the belt. He did all kinds of things.
Now, at some point in your strike that. Did you see a different relationship between Lyle and your father?
Yes.
Now, did your father also hit Lyle?
Yes.
Was he also mean to Lyle sometimes?
Yes.
But what was it your father said or did that was different with respect to Lyle than with respect to you?
I don't know. He just seemed to care more about Lyle. In my mind, it was pretty clear.
And were you happy being Erik, the number 2 son in
No.
that family? What did you want to be?
I wanted to be like Lyle. I wanted to be as good as Lyle. I wanted to be liked as much as Lyle.
Now, did something happen during your 6th year with your father that made you think that perhaps your father did like you after all?
Yes.
And could you tell us what started happening during your 6th year that led you to believe that?
1 minute, guys. I know. I'm noticing that there is a lag in what's playing on the screen from Court TV's website, and I'm getting a notification that my internet's not awesome. I forgot to turn off Wi-Fi for Ethernet. So give me 1 second. Let me see if if I lose you guys, it's because I'm switching to Ethernet and it's not successful. All right. Are we still here? Are we still live? Gotta like pause for it to make sure I get feedback. I think we're good, but I don't know if it's going to be any better even with the Ethernet. Okay. Hopefully this is better.
He used to come into my room and give me massages.
Now, when you say your room, did you share a room with Lyle?
Yes.
During this time when you were 6, how old was Lyle?
Lyle was, I guess, 9.
And was Lyle very involved in competitive sports at that time?
Yes.
And were there any times when Lyle was not home when you were?
Yes.
And when your father would come into your room to give you massages, would Lyle be present
Yes.
in the room?
No, Lyle would be home.
Was he always home?
Yes.
I thought you just said there were times when Lyle was not home.
There were.
Okay, just rephrase the question.
This is hard.
Okay. Were there times when Lyle was not home when you were home alone with your father?
Yes.
Were there times when Lyle was not home when you were home alone with your father and your father was giving you massages?
Yes.
And were there times when your father was giving you massages when Lyle was home?
Yes.
Okay. And would the same be true of your mother?
Yes.
Would she be home?
Sometimes she was out with Lyle. Sometimes she was home. It really didn't matter at that time.
If your father were alone in a room with you, would other people enter or leave the room during the time that your father was there?
No.
Would it matter what your father was doing in the room? In other
It
words,
didn't matter if he was hitting me or if he was just talking to me or if he was giving me massages. No one ever entered the room. My dad was alone with me.
And was the same true when your dad was alone with your brother, for whatever purpose?
Yes.
So your mother, mainly you're saying your mother never went into your bedroom, whether you were in there or Lyle was in there, when your father was alone with one of you?
No.
Sustained. Answer stricken.
Did you ever see your mother enter your bedroom when you were there with your father?
No.
Did you ever hear your mother knock on the door of your bedroom when you were alone in there with your father?
No, my mother never came.
And what about when Lyle was in the bedroom with your father?
No, she told me not to go near the door.
Did you ever see her go near the door?
No.
Now, Mr. Menendez, these massages that your father gave you in your room in Muncie, was this the first time your father had ever massaged you in any way?
No.
What were the previous massages like? And where did they occur?
At swimming. He would massage my legs, my thighs, my calves to get me ready to go swimming.
And the massages in your room, how did they begin? I mean, what types of massages were they in the beginning?
Just the body massages.
Like what you got for swimming?
Similar. He would have me strip off my clothes until I was just wearing my underwear and lie down on my stomach.
And would he tell you why he was massaging you?
Yes.
What would he say?
He would say it's just to relieve the stress, because he would say that the stress built up because of sports, and there was so much tension and stress that I would need to do this to relax.
And at some point, while you were still living at Muncie, did the massages change in character in any way?
Yes.
And what was the change?
He had me take off my underwear.
And when you took off your underwear, did he do things that he had not done before?
Yes.
What did he do?
He would have me turn over onto my back.
Okay. What would he do?
He would massage my genitals.
And did that go on? I mean, how frequent were these massages?
2-3 times a month.
And was there a period when the massages would be what you've just described, and then they changed again? Something new was added?
I don't understand.
When your father massaged your genitals, as you've just described, was he using his hands?
Yes.
At some point after that, did he start doing something else?
Yeah, very soon after.
Oh, God.
I don't even really distinguish between times.
What was the next type of activity called? What did he call it?
Massaging me with his mouth.
And what part of your body would he massage with his mouth?
My penis.
And how did your father...
Yep, trigger warning has been up, and it is going to stay up for a while. So, just voicing that again for you folks. All the trigger warnings for all the things. This is awful, awful to be hearing this stuff. There's just so much of it. All right.
behave with you when these massages were taking place? How did he treat you?
He was great. He was kind. He never said anything negative to me. He told me that I was part of the family and that I belonged, and that this was good.
And did he tell you anything about the activity he was engaged in with you? Did he tell you anything about the massages? What were they?
They were to relieve the stress and the tension, and that's what they were there for.
Were they something that you were supposed to tell everybody about?
No, of course not.
Why
No.
do you say of course not?
Well, he explained to me very clearly that this was something between us, and what he said is that this would stop if I told anyone, and that I wouldn't be alone with him anymore.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This is like, there's something like additionally sick and twisted about the fact that not only is Jose doing these things to him, but he's also like framing it so that this is the only time that Erik ever gets compliments. He ever gets kind words. He ever gets any kind of like warmth or like kindness from him. This is just so horrific. So horrific. I can't even imagine what that does to a boy growing up. That like that's the one circumstance where he's getting nice things said to him by either of his parents. And then saying this is gonna stop if you tell him or if you tell anyone about it. So that it's like you're conditioning it so that he somehow on some level wants it to continue, as shameful and uncomfortable and weird and confusing as it is for him as a kid. So that he wants it to continue because he wants the emotional warmth, the kindness. Oh my God. It's just, it's absolutely disgusting. Just completely disgusting.
And then I wouldn't get this attention.
So he told you to keep it a secret.
Yes.
And did you want it to stop?
No.
Why?
Because it was the only time I got to spend alone with my dad. It was the only time I got to be with him and for him to be nice and caring with me.
See?
So did that make you feel better about your relationship with your father, these
Probably not.
massages that were happening?
Made me feel like
Overall, your answer?
I had a relationship with my dad.
Now, apart from these times when he was alone with you doing these massages, did he treat you better than he had in the past?
Yes, he seemed to care about me. He seemed to love me, and that's all that I wanted.
Oh my God.
Now, is that both when he's doing the massages and at all other times? In other words, did he suddenly become nice to you all the time?
No, only when he was in the room.
My question is, when he was not in the room, how was his behavior towards you?
He was like he always was. He was mean. He was sarcastic. He didn't seem to care about me very much. He was just like he normally was.
And strike that. Now, for as long from the beginning of these massages in your room for as long as you lived in Muncie, did your father do the things that you've already described, these hand and mouth massages?
Yes.
At some point, you recall the family moved to New Jersey.
Yes.
And do you recall any activity like this, massages type activity, occurring in the house on, and I can not remember if it's north or south, but Mill Road?
Yes.
And was it the same kind of activity, the hand and mouth massages?
Yeah, it was similar. It changed at one point, but it was the same type of activity.
Now, in addition to that activity, which was what he was doing to you, had he at any point while you lived in Muncie started asking you to do things to him?
Yes.
And up until the point when you left Muncie, what sorts of things did he have you do to him?
He was just asking me to massage his body with his back. He used to have his underwear on, and he never took it off. Just his legs and his back and his shoulders.
Now, at some point, Mr. Menendez, did the massages that you were doing on your father change?
Yes.
And was there an occasion when he asked you to do something new?
Yes.
And what was it? Would you tell us what it was that he asked you to do?
He took off his underwear, and he had never done that before. And he had me massage the front of him. And
Yes.
so I massaged his calves and his thighs, and I skipped over his genitals because I didn't want to touch him, and I just went to his stomach, and he said no.
And did you understand what he meant?
Yes.
And what happened next?
I just touched him.
And did anything else happen after you touched his genitals?
Yes.
And did anything else happen?
Yes.
What happened?
I started to rub him, and then he told me to massage him with his mouth.
With his mouth?
My mouth.
And do you remember whether or not at that point your father had an erection?
Yes, he did.
And how did you feel about his asking you to massage him with your mouth?
I didn't want to do that because I had never seen him like that, and I didn't want to do it.
Did it frighten you?
Yes.
Did you therefore refuse, and that ended things?
No, I wanted this time to go on with my dad. I didn't want it to end, so I was going to do what he said. I just didn't want to do all things.
Did you do what he asked you to do during that session?
Yes.
And what happened when you tried to do that?
I gagged. He put his hand on my head, and he shoved my head on his penis, and it went in too far, and I tried to push away, and he just did it. He tried to be calm about it and be nice, but it was too big, and it was too far inside me, and I just pulled away.
Now, did he get angry or upset with you on that occasion?
No.
So it was still nice?
No, I mean, it was nice to be with him. I didn't like what I was doing, but I figured that it was just me, and then I would get used to it. I didn't think my dad was doing something wrong.
I need to pause for a second. I need to pause because it's just a lot. It's just a lot that they're just going through right now. I feel like I need to shower after this. Like it's awful. It's awful. All of this right now. And I fully believe him in what he is saying. Like to me, he comes across as completely sincere. I don't know how someone watches this testimony and does not believe the things that he's saying. In 1993, I can at least rationally understand it because there was not nearly as much of an understanding about these kind of things as there is today, I am not looking forward to the cross-examination. That's going to be awful. Just awful. But yeah, this is just horrible, just completely horrible. Okay. I mean, I don't really have much, anything more eloquent than that to say about this, but it's just let's get through it. Let's get through it. Okay.
Did you think anything that had happened up till then was wrong or unnatural or abnormal or weird or anything like that?
No.
Did your dad, strike that, excuse me, Your Honor, did your father talk to you about whether what was going on between you and he was okay or right or normal or historical or anything like that?
Yes, he said it was something that was supposed to happen, and he often referred to ancient times in the Romans and the Greeks and how they used to have sex before battle and talk about how this was natural and this was supposed to happen.
And did you, now you're about how old now, 7, 8?
I'm in the North Mill house.
So you're about 7?
Yes.
Do you think your father was a real smart guy when you were 7?
Yes.
Did you feel your father was very knowledgeable?
I thought he knew everything.
Did you believe everything he told you?
Yes.
And so did you believe that what he told you about this was true?
Yes.
And did you continue to believe that for a while?
I believed that for a long time.
Now this, strike that, after the North Mill Road house, the family then moved to Pennington?
Yes.
And the activities that you've now described, did they continue in the Pennington house?
Yes.
Did you have a room of your own in the North Mill Road house?
Yes.
And did you continue to have a room of your own in the Pennington house?
Yes.
And the activity that you've described so far with your father giving you 2 kinds of massages and you giving him 2 kinds of massages, did that continue the same when you were in the Pennington house?
Yes, I didn't think of it as 2 kinds of massages, though.
Well, I know, I'm calling it that for now, okay? After this occasion when your father asked you to do a mouth massage, did he continue to ask you to do massages with your hands?
Yes.
And were there other episodes of mouth massages where you were doing that for your father?
It would be one and the other, one after another.
And was he continuing to do the 2 kinds of massages to you?
Yes, he would almost always come in my room and do it to me first, and then I would just follow whatever he was doing.
So you tried to do to him what he was doing to you?
Yes, that's what I did.
And at some point, did the nature of these incidents change? Did he either stop doing certain things he had been doing? Did he start doing other things? Did he have you do other things?
Yes.
Okay, tell me what the change was.
He started using different tools and wanting me to do things to him so that he would show me how, and he would do them to me, and so on.
What do you mean by tools?
He had this wooden,
Oh, God.
it was about this long, and it had a little knob at the end, and it was roundish. And he would tell me to use that on myself, and he would show me how to use it on him, and then he would use it on me.
And what part of your body were you supposed to use this thing on?
My butt.
And did this use of this tool continue over a period of time?
Only a short time until he started showing me how to use my penis. I didn't call it that at the time, but that's what it was.
And he started to show you how to use your penis to do something to him?
Yes.
Uh,
All right.
Mr. Menendez, do you have some idea of approximately how old you were when your father started showing you how to do something with your
Yeah, I
penis?
was still swimming. I believe I was in 5th grade.
5th grade?
Yeah.
So you would have been 10?
Yes.
And at some point, had he taught you what he wanted you to do to him with your penis?
Yes.
And was there a period when you were having anal intercourse with your father where you were the person penetrated?
Yes.
And during this period of time, what was the mood of these incidents with your father?
I didn't like what was going on. I thought it was really dirty, and but the mood was light, and he would show me how to do something and talk about it matter of factly and talk about how this was normal and this was supposed to be done and like anything else.
Was he still being nice?
Yes.
Now, when he, this wooden implement, you said he showed you how to use it on him, but you were also supposed to use it on yourself?
Yes, he gave me that and another thing to use on myself when he wasn't. He was trying to do it to me, but it wasn't working. It was.
When you say it wasn't working, was it hurting?
Yes.
So,
All right, the objection is overruled as to that question, but counsel, please refrain from asking leading questions.
okay. How did your father react at that stage to things hurting you?
He was nice about it. He didn't want to hurt me.
So
and-
what would he do if something was hurting you? Would he continue to do it? Would he
No,
stop?
he'd stop.
And did you ever use that wooden thing on yourself when he wasn't around?
No.
Did you know why he wanted you? Did he say why he wanted you to use that thing?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
I don't remember exactly what he told me, but I knew why. It was so that I could practice on myself so that it wouldn't hurt anymore when he did.
Now, at some point, did your father stop being nice?
Yes.
Approximately how old were you?
I was 11 years old. It was just after I finished swimming.
What do you mean by finish swimming?
Swimming had ended. I ended swimming, and it was started after that point.
I don't understand what you mean by you ended swimming. Does that mean you
Swimming had stopped. He had told me that I had to take a certain course in sports. I was either tennis, soccer, or swimming, and it was clear that he wanted me to go into tennis like Lyle had.
you were supposed to choose a sport,
Yes.
and you were supposed to choose a sport to compete in from then on?
Yes.
And it could have been swimming or tennis or soccer?
Yes.
Was it a team sport, okay, or was it supposed to be an individual sport?
No, he wanted me to choose. It was clear he wanted me to choose swimming. Tennis, and because Lyle had gone into it and he didn't want me to swim anymore. So I chose tennis.
That was the impression you got when you chose tennis, that he didn't want you to swim anymore?
I just didn't know. It was real confusing. He sat down with me and he came over to me and he said, "What sport do you want to play? You have to choose a sport." Because I was 11 years old and he said I was becoming a man and it was time to choose a sport. And so I said tennis. Later,
1 second, guys. I'm going to be right back. Okay. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. We're trying to get some stuff figured out in the background. We're gonna continue on. Kel Marie, I see you in the chat asking about number 43. Yes, there was a number 43. I may not have updated the playlist, so I'm gonna do that while we watch. So just so you know, it'll be in there. Draco Amy has linked to the individual one down below, but I'm gonna add it to the playlist just for folks that are catching up. Thank you so much for letting me know, and I'll fix that up. Okay, let's continue with the testimony.
I found out that he didn't want me to choose tennis, that he wanted me. I blame myself. I thought maybe he wanted me to do swimming, but at the time I thought he wanted me to choose tennis because Lyle had gone into it.
At the time that you chose the sport, you thought your father wanted you to pick tennis. Is
Yes.
that right? Later on, after something happened, did you think that your father had actually wanted you to choose swimming? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Now, what was it, Mr. Menendez, that happened that made you think that your father was upset with you for having given up swimming?
He wasn't nice anymore during the sex.
You have to put the mic in.
He wasn't nice anymore during the sex.
Now, do you recall the first time that he wasn't nice during the sex?
Yes. Yes.
And you were 11?
I was 11.
The reason you're having trouble is it's not facing you. Face it.
I know. I need to use the restroom. I need a break.
Okay, we'll take a recess and we'll resume at 3:30 or 2:30. I'm sorry, 2:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss the case with anyone or form any opinions about it. We'll resume at 2:30. So
Completely understandable that he needs a break. I mean, this is a lot of heavy stuff that he's having to go through. And even though it's, on direct, it's by his own attorney, it's not on cross-examination yet, which, like I said, that's going to be a horrible experience for him, I'm sure. It's still hard stuff to go through. I mean, embarrassing things, like getting all kinds of questions about it, like even asking him, like, if he had wanted it to continue. And he said yes, not because of the things that were happening, but because of the kindness that he was getting from his father during those times. It's just, that's a lot for someone to sort of parse through, and then also to admit, because like, if you say you've been abused, but and you in speaking truthfully have to admit to yourself and the world that there was a part of you that wanted it to continue for a very specific reason, but that you had wanted it to continue. There's so much to unpack there. There's so much to like to like work through. It's a lot. It's a lot. And the amount of like, I haven't, it's been a very long time since I've seen the substance of like the Saturday Night Live skits, for example, on this case. Part of me wants to go back to see it just to see like what they thought was funny about the case. But part of me feels like I'm going to be horrified if I go back and look and be like, this aged horrifically. Also, it probably wasn't even funny back then. Like it's just like they were lampooned on top of everything. Just horrible. Question from Debbie Faison Cook. Kind of off topic, but something that I've always wondered: are defendants guarded during recess? I mean, if they're not going anywhere, they probably just are able to stay there in the courtroom. Otherwise, if they have, like, if he had to go to the bathroom, he was definitely going to be escorted. And probably to a particular bathroom. I mean, definitely not one like in the hallway that everybody else uses, the public uses. So yeah. Rough. Okay. All right. Let's continue.
You may resume your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, this particular incident when you were 11, do you remember it?
Yes, very well.
How do you think about this incident in relation to things that happened both before and after?
It's one that just really stands out in my mind.
Is it one of the worst things that happened to you?
Yes.
And thinking about it, do you remember what was happening in the house? Anything you heard or saw before this incident actually began?
Yes.
What was it that was happening?
I heard some fighting with my parents downstairs.
Who was fighting with your parents?
My mom and my dad were fighting.
Between themselves?
Yes.
Was this a physical altercation or a verbal fight?
I didn't know if it was physical. I just heard the verbal. I just heard them yelling at each other.
Okay. And what happened after you heard them yelling at each other?
I heard my father coming up the stairs.
And what house are you in?
Pennington.
Okay. And what happened when your father got up the stairs?
He came toward my room. All I could think about was him coming toward my room and how I was hoping he wasn't going to do that.
Do what?
Come toward my room.
Why?
Because I didn't want him to come into my room when he was angry.
Even if he was angry at someone else?
Yes.
Did you think that it was going to be something sexual?
No, I didn't think it was going to be something sexual if he was angry at that time.
Okay. What did you think was going to happen if he was angry at that time?
I thought he was just going to take out the belt or hit me or throw me someplace. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Did you know what the topic of the argument was between your mother and father?
No.
Did you have any concerns about what it might have been?
Yeah, I was concerned that it might have been over me.
Had there been arguments in the past over you?
Yes.
And had any of those arguments in the past over you resulted in your father physically hurting you?
Yes, he would get angry with Mom, and they would yell back and forth, and then he'd come to my room and just hit me or whatever.
So did you think it was possibly one of those episodes about to occur?
Yes, that's what I thought was about to occur.
So if you could tell us what happened, in fact, when he came into your room on this occasion.
He came into the room and he told me to kneel down on my bed,
Oh God.
Okay.
and I did. And he came over to my bed and threw me off the bed, and told me to kneel on the floor. And
You made a sweeping motion with your right hand when you said he.
Yeah, he just threw me with his hand on my arm here.
He took you back on the arm and threw you off the bed
Yes.
and said,
And said for me to get on my knees on the floor. And I was real confused because he had just said to get on my knees on the bed. And so I didn't know what to do.
what did you think was going to happen when he told you to get on your knees on the bed?
I thought it might have been some sort of sex,
Why did you think that?
because when he told me to get on my knees in the bed, usually what would happen would be for me to have some sort of sex with him. But it was strange because he didn't tell me to take off my clothes. He didn't help me take off my clothes like he used to do. He just told me to kneel on the bed, and I didn't understand why. I didn't know what was going on.
So did you then kneel on the floor as he ordered you to do?
Yes.
And was he dressed?
Yes.
Okay, what happened? First of all, did it hurt when he threw you off the bed?
I hit my head against the wall, but I wasn't thinking about that.
Okay, what happened next?
He was unbuckling his pants,
Oh God.
and he pulled out his penis. And in some way, either by his hand on my head or by telling me, he told me he wanted me to massage his penis with my mouth.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And you had done that before, hadn't you?
Yes.
Had you ever done it being on the floor on your knees?
No.
Mr. Menendez, is this the beginning of what you came to call knees?
Yes.
And did you call it that because of the position you had to take?
Yes.
A little bit leading, but
And what
no
happened
infection so far.
ultimately in this episode?
I had to give him a massage on my knees until he started to have an orgasm.
Ugh.
And had he ever done that before while you were giving him a mouth massage?
No, he had done it, not in my mouth. I was ready to pull away like I'd always done, and then he just came on a towel or a sheet, whatever he had with him. So I was about to pull away because I didn't know what was going to happen because we weren't on a bed and I was just kneeling down. And he said, "No, swallow," and he held my head to him.
And therefore, did he ejaculate in your mouth?
Yes,
And did you swallow?
partly.
And did this upset you?
Yes,
And how did you demonstrate being upset?
I was crying.
And how did he react to your crying?
He pushed me away afterwards.
And did he say or do anything to you afterwards?
Yes.
What did he say or do?
He said, "Why can't you just be like your brother?"
Oh God.
What did that mean?
I thought he just meant, why do I have to cry all the time?
And was he, what was his tone of voice when he said this?
He was rough and he was angry.
Did he at any time at this point use the word embarrassment?
I don't remember him using the word embarrassment. He just started talking about how I wasn't a Menendez and how I was never going to be good enough to be a Menendez and how he was ashamed to have me as his son.
Oh
And,
my God.
and then he said I'd get used to it and left.
Oh my God.
And what were you doing while he was saying these things to you?
I was just sitting on the floor crying.
Yeah.
And after he left, what happened?
I went to the door to see if he was still around the corner, and I just went to the bathroom and threw up.
Where was the bathroom in relation to your bedroom?
Just in the middle of the hall,
In the middle between what and what?
between my bedroom and my parents' bedroom.
Back up from the mic a little bit. And you threw up in the bathroom on that occasion?
Yes.
Now, were there other incidents like this one after this incident?
Yes, this is what started to happen all the time. He no longer had me on the bed. He no longer had me sit on the bed between his legs. He no longer had me lie down on the bed. It was just on my knees.
And in addition to your just being on your knees, was his attitude after this different than it had been?
Yes, it changed dramatically.
And how was he from then on?
He was no longer nice. He now yelled at me all the time. He forced me to do things. I had to do whatever he said, and it didn't matter if I complained or if I said no or if I said, please stop. He didn't stop. He completely changed.
And when other episodes like this would occur, did you ever throw up after those?
Yes, I threw up almost every time when he would come in my mouth.
Now, how far away from your parents' bedroom was this bathroom where you were throwing up?
8 feet, 10 feet.
And your mother, Mr. Menendez, when you were in the bathroom throwing up because of what your father had done, did your mother ever come to you?
No.
Were there times up until this point in your life, 11 years old, when you had been ill and thrown up?
Yes.
And had you thrown up in that very same bathroom?
Yes.
And when you were ill and threw up, did your mother come in the bathroom?
Yes.
Did she make inquiry?
Yes, she asked me what was wrong.
At any time, Mr. Menendez, from this point on, when you were in that bathroom throwing up because of sex with your father, did your mother ever come in?
No.
Now, after this incident at 11, did your mother begin to do something peculiar with respect to your body?
No, it wasn't right after that incident. It was much later.
How much later?
Almost a year. It was when other stuff started to happen.
What kind of other stuff was happening? Just generically.
Actual sex.
Intercourse?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And it was after that started to happen that your mother started to do something to you?
Yes.
Oh God.
And what was it that your mother started to do?
She would ask me to sit on the bed and take down my pants so she could examine me.
Examine you where?
And my genitals. She called it checking me out. She would say, let me check you out. And I would sit down on the bed and she would look at my penis.
Would she, did she tell you why she was checking you out?
She just said to see if there was anything wrong. She didn't give me any details about why.
And were there times when there was something unusual?
Yes.
Okay. And what were these unusual things?
I would just have small blisters on my penis.
And would your mother do anything about that?
Yes.
What did she do?
She used to squeeze them and pop them.
And did she ever ask you where they were coming from?
No.
And did she ever tell you what they were?
No.
And at that point, strike that, you've testified that around 10, your father had taught you to have anal sex with him, correct?
He taught me how to do it, yes.
Yes. And at this point, when your mother is checking you out, is that still happening?
Very infrequently.
Does your mother continue to check you out for several years?
Yeah, all the way up until we moved to California.
And is there some other types of activities with your father that begin during the period that she's checking you out?
Yes.
Oh God.
And are those the things you came to call rough sex?
Oh.
Actually, I was referring to nice sex.
Okay, but was there also rough sex happening during that time?
Yes.
And did rough sex involve your father hurting you with things?
Yes.
And what kind of things was he hurting you with?
Needles, pins, tacks,
What was he doing with the
Rope.
needles? Excuse me?
rope.
What was he doing with the needles and the pins and the tacks, generally?
He was sticking them into my thighs and my butt.
Was he doing anything to your penis?
Yes.
What was he doing?
Sometimes he'd be giving me oral sex, and sometimes he would have just tied up my penis.
Back up. Tied it up with the rope?
Yes.
And would that hurt?
Yes, very much so.
And when those activities were going on, was your mother still checking you out?
Yes.
Now, your father, during the years that you lived in Pennington, was an executive with the RCA Corporation, was he not?
Yes.
And was he traveling a lot?
Yes, he was traveling almost every week. At least he was in New York, away from the house almost every week.
Well, was he away for the whole week, or was he away at least part of each week?
Part of each week.
Was he a very busy person?
Yes.
And did he talk about how important and busy he was at work?
Yes, he'd talk about his work, not during these sessions, but at home at other times.
At any time, Mr. Menendez, when you were alone with your father in your room, when any of these sexual things would happen, would your mother ever come and say, Jose, you have a phone call, or anything like that?
No.
Did your father spend a lot of time on the phone with business other than when he was in your room?
Yes.
And would he receive a lot of phone calls at the house?
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, during these years when you were living in Pennington and these things were happening, did you think your mother knew what was going on?
No,
Speculation overall.
no, I didn't.
Were there times when, following one of these episodes with your father, you'd be crying?
Yes.
Did your mother ever come upon you when you were crying?
Sometimes after these, I'd have to go downstairs to dinner, or afterwards, and she would come when she'd see me crying. And
Did
yes.
she ever ask you, Erik, what are you crying about?
No.
Would she ask you that sometimes if you were crying and it had nothing to do with sex with your father?
Sometimes, but often when I was crying, it was apparent why I was crying.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, I would be crying at the swimming pool, or I'd be crying coming from school, and then she'd ask me what was wrong. But if it was from sports or just from coming out of my room, she would.
I don't understand what you mean from sports. Perhaps I didn't understand your
If it was from swimming or if it was from tennis, almost never when I was playing soccer, I don't think I cried. But if it was from sports and she was there and I
She
came
knew.
out, yes.
Okay. What I'm saying is, were there times that you would be crying when she didn't know what caused it, and she would ask you?
Yes.
Did she ever ask you why you were crying when it followed one of these episodes with your father?
No.
And what would she say, if anything, to you when you were crying following these episodes with your father?
She would say, do what I told you to do.
What had she told you to do?
She taught me how to hide my tears and to not cry. And if I was crying, she taught me how to get rid of the tears, make it seem like I hadn't been crying.
And what was the method?
She had water that she would tell me to put in my eyes. Otherwise, she had this little special thing that she would keep in my bathroom to put in my eyes.
What was this little special thing?
I'm not sure what it was. It was in a little plastic container.
And she put it in your eyes?
She taught me how to.
So you'd put it in your eyes?
Yes.
These episodes with your father, what time of day did they usually occur?
At night.
Before or after dinner?
Either before or after. Usually before when he got home from work, but sometimes it would happen after.
If it were before dinner, would you still be expected to come down to dinner?
Probably.
Yes, unless I was unable to.
And were there times when you were unable to eat dinner?
There were times when I was unable to come down to dinner
Why was that?
because I was crying too much or I was too much of a mess and I was shaking and I couldn't come down to dinner. I used to get these these pounding headaches, sort of like sears through my brain. And my dad would say, "You're not going down to dinner."
Were you usually, however, expected to go down to dinner after one of these episodes?
Yes.
And would that be why you would dry your tears or put water in your eyes?
Yes, a lot of times. Sometimes not. Sometimes I would go down to dinner with my eyes red.
And what would happen? How did your father react to that?
He didn't like it, and sometimes he would cope with it, and he just wouldn't talk to me. I was usually ignored at dinner anyway, but this time he really wouldn't talk to me.
Now, if we could go back, after this incident that you've described when you were 11, did your ideas about these times alone with your father change?
Of course, I don't understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay, what did you think of what was going on at that point when your father got violent when you were 11?
I thought he was just angry at me. I learned that he actually just wasn't angry at me, but at the time I thought he was just angry at me.
And what did you think he was angry about? What had you done?
I wasn't sure at first. Later on, I figured that maybe he really wanted me to choose swimming, and since that was his sport when he was growing up, and he was just doing this to get back at me.
So that's what you seized upon? You thought, oh, it must be because I gave up swimming?
Yes.
Oh my God.
His anger, however, in these episodes, you said went on for a long time.
Yes.
Did you think you were doing anything else wrong that would make him angry with you this way?
I thought I must have been doing something wrong, and I didn't know what. So I just tried to do everything right. I tried to be perfect in school. I tried to be perfect in tennis. But I didn't know what exactly I was doing wrong.
This sounds very, very, very common for abuse victims. I'm just going to say that. Trying to figure out, like, oh, I must be doing something wrong. There's something here that I am not doing correctly, and I'm going to try to be perfect so that I can please my abuser and hope that the abuse stops. It's awful.
He didn't tell me.
And did the fact that these kinds of episodes were now happening change the way you felt about your life?
Of course. How do you mean change?
Did you get depressed?
Yes, I got very depressed, and I just had trouble concentrating in school. I just had trouble dealing with it.
And
Really, I had trouble dealing with the fact that my father no longer loved me, more than anything else. But it was because when it got painful, it was harder. But when it was just giving him massages, it was just because he didn't love me.
Oh.
I don't understand. What do you mean when you were just giving him massages?
Before anything really painful started to happen, I felt very depressed and very lonely because I lost my dad's love, and I didn't understand why I did that. But after it got painful, then I started just wanting it to end and not really caring so much about dad's love as much.
Now, when it got painful, is that what we were talking about? Is that the rough sex stuff?
Yes.
And how old were you when that started?
I was 13.
And how long did that go on?
Until we moved to Princeton.
Okay. And you moved to Princeton when you were 15 and a half?
Yes.
Now, before the rough sex started, the thing that you talked about with the tax and such, was there yet another, well, strike that. Let me back up. You said at some point your father had anal sex with you. Is that right?
Yes.
And how old do you believe you were when that happened?
I was in 6th grade. I guess I'm pretty sure I was 12.
And was that within a year of the episode you previously described at 11?
Yes.
Now, you've mentioned earlier that he had made some efforts to accomplish anal intercourse with you that had been unsuccessful because it hurt you,
Yes.
and therefore he had stopped.
Yes.
And that was before the incident when you were 11 when he was violent. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, when you were 12, do you recall the day that he succeeded?
Yes.
And was that a gentle process or not?
No, not at all.
What was it, Mr. Menendez?
It was very, very painful.
And do you know if on that occasion anyone else was in the home besides yourself and your father?
No, I was alone in the house with my dad.
Now, was there a part of your bed that was removable?
Yes.
And what was that part?
It was a wooden slat that there were many of them under my bed, but he had taken one off and left it off.
He being whom?
My father.
And when had he done that, removed one and left it off?
Early on.
I don't know what that means.
Early on when I guess I was, before anything bad started to happen. It must have been
Before you
9,
were 11?
10. Yes.
But you were living in Pennington?
Yes.
And what would he do with the slat that he took off from the bed?
He would wedge it underneath the door, underneath the doorknob, and the carpet.
So that no one could open the door from the outside?
Yes.
And I think you've already said your mother never came to the door anyway.
No.
So did you have in mind at the time who that slat was supposed to keep out?
Well, I thought it was to keep out anyone from coming in the room. It just happened that no one came to the room ever, but I didn't know.
Who were the candidates? Who were the other people who lived in this house?
My mother and my brother. And at some time, Diane.
When Diane lived with you?
Yes.
Wow. Diane was there.
Now,
when it
on this
was happening.
particular occasion, nobody else is home?
No.
No?
No one else is home.
Okay. And do you recall basically what happened?
Yes.
Basically what happened?
My dad came in and told me to take off my clothes and to kneel on the bed. And he closed the blinds and he put the slat underneath the door like he always did. And he told me to bend over the footboard.
This bed had a footboard and a headboard?
Yes.
And did you know what it meant to be told to bend over the footboard?
Yes.
He had had you do that before?
Yes. It's when he tried to have sex with me but wasn't able to.
And did your father put anything on you or ask you to put anything on you?
This time he just did it himself. Usually he told me to.
What was it that was put on you?
He had a Vaseline jar.
And in the past, when he had tried to do this, he had had you put the Vaseline on?
Yes, he put some on himself, and he had me put them on myself.
On this occasion, he...
Good Lord. Horrible. Okay.
put it on you?
Yes.
And what happened?
And he lined himself up when he started going into me like he had always done, but this time he was going in too far. And I said, "Dad, please stop." And I said, "Dad, you're hurting me." And he just kept on going further. At one point, I just started screaming and I started saying, "Stop, it hurts, it hurts." And he just went all the way in.
And did that hurt?
Yes.
And how did you react to that pain?
I just sort of died off. I didn't, I stopped screaming and I just sort of left myself.
You left yourself?
I just pretended that it wasn't happening. I pretended that the pain wasn't happening, and I just went away in my mind. It was too painful.
That sounds like things that you would hear from an abuse victim. But this is like textbook what an abuse victim would often say.
When it was over, did you cry?
I was crying during it.
Okay. And after it was over, were you still crying?
Yes.
And did your father say anything to you at that time?
Yeah, he had a towel on the bed, and he put the towel on the bed, and he had me sit on the towel so that I wouldn't get anything on the bed. And he said very calmly and looked at me and told me to look him in the eyes. And he said, next time you ever scream or yell, I'm going to beat you so bad you'll never be able to scream or yell again.
Oh my God.
Do you, did it occur to you, did something occur to you about this episode concerning why he had gone ahead when you were in pain?
Yes.
What was that?
It was because when I had screamed or yelled or cried out before, he had told me that if I ever did that, he was going to go all the way inside of me.
That was on a previous occasion when he was trying to do this?
Yes.
So he kept his word.
Yes.
Did you believe, Mr. Menendez, as you were growing up, that your father was a person who would make good on his threats?
Oh, yes.
Now, did your father, in this particular conversation after this episode, strike that. Your father said to you that if you scream again, he'll make sure he hits you hard enough that you won't be able to cry or scream again?
Yes.
And did he explain to you whose fault that would be?
Yes, he asked me whose fault it would be. He asked me if I understood, and I said yes. And he said, so if I ever do that, do you understand whose fault it'll be, or do you know why it will happen? And I said yes.
Okay. And whose fault would it be?
He made it very clear that it would be my fault, and I understood that it would.
What did you do, if anything, after this episode? Did your father leave after he had told you it would be your fault?
Yes, he left and he closed the door.
And when he told you this about whose fault it would be, what kind of mood was he in?
He was in a very stern, very serious, very strong mood.
And what did you do after he had left?
I sort of waited outside the door in my bedroom, listening to see where he had gone, and then just went to my bathroom and got in the tub.
Took a bath?
I took a hot bath and just promised myself to do whatever he wanted, never to scream, never to yell, never to cry. Just do what he wanted when it happened.
Now, over the preceding couple of years, talking about now you're 12 when this happened, is that right?
Yes.
Over the previous couple of years, had, in the incidents with your father, had the talking stopped?
Oh, yes. No, he told me that he didn't want me to say a word when he spoke, and he talked about silence. When he talked, he would talk, but he would never want me to say a word unless he spoke to me. And when he talked, he would give me lectures about silence, about the Romans, about the Greeks. He would lecture me about different things.
During the sex or during the visits that included sex? Is
Either
that
while I was getting dressed or while I was undressing. Sometimes in the middle, but usually not.
And were you allowed to talk?
No, not unless I was asked a question.
And did silence become the pattern?
Yes, he told me all about silence.
What about silence, Mr. Menendez? What did he tell you?
He told me that silence was the greatest thing that man had. He said that it was the greatest power that anyone could achieve, and that with silence you could control anyone.
And was there a time then when the sexual episodes with your father were totally and completely silent?
Yes.
When he would say nothing whatsoever?
Yes, then it would be silent.
And you would say nothing whatsoever?
Yes.
Now, was there a time when the sexual incidents that you have called nice sex began?
Yes.
How old were you when that happened?
I believe it was just after 6th grade. I know it was before 7th grade, but I believe it was just before the ending of 6th grade, or in the spring, or right before the summer. I know Diane was there, so it had to be right around that period.
Now, why, Mr. Menendez, did you come to label these incidents nice sex?
Because of how bad the rough sex was.
Oh God.
Okay. So by comparison, these were nice.
Yes.
And were these incidents different than knees?
Yes, completely different.
Okay. What was different about this?
Oh, Nico Kiski. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm just trying. I'm like everybody else. I'm trying to work through it. This is very emotionally impacting. And I'm definitely the pup and the cats after this, and of course, Mr. Bites. But this is a lot. This is for some reason this bit of testimony is like, it just feels so much worse than like all of the other stuff that we've gone through, and it's just rough. But I appreciate you asking after me. And yeah, it's just it's really, I mean, he's gone through so much that like when he's like, yeah, in comparison to the rough sex, like that was nice stuff, like that's why I started to call it that. Like, it's just, all of it is abuse, all of it is essay, all of it is horrific, but like there's a version of it that to him was nice in comparison. Like, that's how bad the bad stuff was. All right, let's continue
This. And you don't have to describe everything that was done here, okay? Just the general feeling of it. What was different about this than knees?
It wasn't violence. He wouldn't come in and have nice sex when he was in a bad mood. He would always do it when he wanted to relax, when he had a tough day at work, he said, and he just wanted to be comfortable with me. He would come in and have this with me.
And did this involve a variety of sexual activities
Yes.
that he required you to do to him?
Objection.
Could you characterize in 2 sentences, perhaps, what was involved in these episodes of nice sex? You don't have to give details. You don't want to give the details of this, do you?
It just had me giving him massages with my mouth, him giving me massages with his mouth, and my testicles and my butt, and so on.
Okay. And he wouldn't be angry or violent during these?
No.
Now, rough sex, strike that. Would these episodes called nice sex take longer or less time than, say, knees?
It took a lot longer.
How did you feel about these episodes?
I liked knees better because it was short, and he would just come in, and sometimes he'd have me make me swallow, and sometimes he wouldn't. And I really didn't like that at all, but it was short, and I wouldn't have to put up with a lot of long, drawn-out things.
Okay. And nice sex was longer and long drawn-out things?
Yes.
And rough sex, did it seem to be related in some way to one of the other types?
It seemed to be related to the nice sex, but it was different.
And what was different about rough sex?
It was very strange. It was very dark. He turned off the lights. He put candles around the bed and on my nightstand and on my dressers, and he would light them, and he would put the candles in cups, the cups that he would bring from the kitchen, or different plates that were in my bedroom. And it would be very dark, and it would be very quiet, and he would do these things to me.
And was that when he was doing things with tacks and such?
Objection.
Have you told us already about some of the things he would do?
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, before this set of episodes called Rough Sex began, did your father announce to you something about pain training?
Yes, he did.
And could you tell us about that?
He told me that I was the biggest sissy and the biggest coward he had ever seen in his entire life, and that he was ashamed to have me as a son because I couldn't take the pain and I couldn't be brave, from what he had seen.
What was he referring to? Do you know?
He was referring to a shot I got in the doctor's office when I was in this doctor's office and he was there. The doctor had pulled out this needle, and I was real calm and I was real relaxed until he stuck it in me, and I was screaming and crying and really crying out to the point where I had to go out the back door of the office. And
Why'd you have to go out the back door of the office?
because I was embarrassed, but he was so embarrassed that he could not leave and go into a group of people who were in the doctor's office waiting room.
Who's he? Who was embarrassed?
My father.
Okay. So you were crying and he didn't want to walk you through the waiting room because you were crying?
No, he didn't want to walk through the waiting room because I had been screaming in the doctor's office.
Okay. Were you still screaming?
No.
He just didn't want anybody to know who was the screaming kid?
Yes.
Okay. And after this, he made this announcement to you about your being sissy and coward.
Yes.
And what did he tell you he was going to do about that, if anything?
He told me that he was going to train me how not to feel pain, not to have to feel the hurt of the pain, and that he was going to eliminate that from my senses, my feelings.
And how did he then demonstrate to you how he was going to do that?
He did that.
Would you back up from the mic a little bit? Thank you. And would you tell us, how did he do that?
He would stick things in me as he was giving me oral sex, or at times he would just sit on the bed with his legs up, spread, and with his back to the back of the bed, and he would have me give him oral sex, and he would stick the needles or the tacks into my thighs as he was doing this.
Did he also use a knife at any time during, and these were the incidents that you've come to call rough sex?
Yes.
And did he also use a knife at any time?
Yes, he would. He had this wooden kitchen knife that he would use he wouldn't be doing anything with sex at that point, though. He would just have me sit on the back of the bed. He would put a towel under my legs, and he would just cut my thighs with the knife.
And do you have a scar that is still visible on your thigh from when he did that?
Yes.
Which thigh is it?
My left thigh.
And how long is this?
It's not really my thigh. It's my right on the side of my knee.
On the side of your knee?
Yeah, right at the bottom of my thigh.
And how long is this scar?
It's about that long.
And you recall that that's something that was done during one of these episodes?
Yes.
Was there something, Mr. Menendez, that you called the mirror?
Yes.
And what was the mirror?
The mirror would happen a lot after sex. Sometimes it would just happen after I played tennis, or just when he got home and wanted to know how I practiced. It was a circular mirror it was like a sailing mirror. It looked like a sailor's port, and it had sticks coming out the side of it, like 12 sticks around the mirror. And
Did it look like a
it had
wheel
rungs.
of a ship?
Yes, that's exactly what it looked like.
Okay. It was a round mirror
Yes.
that looked like a ship's wheel?
Yes.
Okay. And where was it? What room was it in?
It was in my room on my, not my nightstand, the dresser, right across from my bed. That's what it's called.
It was in your bedroom. Was it mounted on the wall, or was it sitting on the dresser?
It was just sitting on the dresser, leaning up against the wall.
And what did the mirror have to do with your father? Well, strike this. He would be drilling you, asking you questions.
Yes.
What did the mirror have to do with his asking you questions?
Well, he would take my chair. I had a wooden chair, and he would take it and he would put it in front of the mirror, or he would have me stand up in the mirror. If it was after sex, I'd be doing it naked. If it was after tennis, I'd have my tennis clothes on. And he'd walk around behind me and ask me questions.
What kinds of questions?
He would say, "How did you feel today when you were on the tennis court? Did you feel you did well?"
And what would you say?
I would give my answer.
Well, hypothetically, give an answer so we can hear how this would go.
I would say, yeah, I think I played well. And he would say wrong.
And now what was supposed to happen, if anything, when he said wrong?
I'd have to hit myself in the head.
You'd have to hit yourself?
Yes.
Without hitting yourself, would you just show us what you were supposed to do? But don't hit yourself.
I'd have to go like this.
Okay. And what would happen if you didn't go like this?
Well, it wasn't like this. I'd have to hit myself.
I understand that you'd have to hit yourself. And what if you didn't hit yourself hard enough, or if you didn't do it, or if you missed? What would happen?
He'd hit me.
And where would he hit you?
In the back of the head.
And how long would these question sessions in front of the mirror go on?
Half hour.
And how many wrongs
Not sure.
typically would you hear?
I would hear, it depended on how stubborn it. There were times when I just couldn't take it anymore. It would just well up inside of me, and I couldn't stand it. And I knew the answer he would want after a while. I knew that if I was on the tennis court, he'd say, how did you play in tennis today? And I'd say, badly. And he'd say, right. And I'd say, how did you hit your forehand? I'd say, terribly. And he'd say, right. And he'd say, did you hit it down the line like I told you to? No. And he'd say, right. But sometimes he'd trick me once he knew that I was catching on to him. And sometimes I would just give the wrong answer on purpose.
Would you give a truthful answer? In other words, if you thought you played well, would you sometimes say, I played well?
Sometimes I would say I played well, but I knew I'd get punished for that.
You knew he'd say wrong,
Yes.
but you did it anyway.
Yes.
Because you had played well.
I had played well, and that wasn't really the reason. I just needed to defy him in any way I could.
Okay. And what would be the result of that kind of defiance?
I'd hit myself.
And how often would the mirror occur?
At least every week. Sometimes more. It really depended. It would usually happen on a Saturday and Sunday after I played tennis, or one time during the week after any sort of sex massage. It depended.
Mr. Menendez, could you please sit back for a second? Take a breath and see if you can stay back there. Okay?
Yeah, he's having he's been doing this throughout, right? Like every once in a while, she asks him to like back off the mic. And the reason why he's getting so close to it is because he's hunching forward. He's like, he's also taking these deep breaths as he's listening to her and so on and so forth. It's like, it doesn't take a body language expert to see that he is really trying to keep it together here as he's talking, as he's explaining, as he's revisiting all of these horrible, horrible memories. Yeah. Yeah, Debbie Faison on Cook. He's turtling. Agreed. Okay. All right. Let's continue with this. The only way out is through.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you heard your brother Lyle testify that there were many, many occasions in his life when your father would take him to some part of the house and they would sit down for hours at a time and your father would lecture or drill your brother. You heard that testimony.
Yes.
Did your father ever take you to some part of the house other than your bedroom and give you similar lectures and drills to what he did to Lyle?
No, it'd only be the mirror.
It would only be?
It would only be the mirror.
So the mirror was what he did to talk to you?
Yes.
And what about the dinner table? You heard your brother describe what he was put through at the dinner table. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did that sound right to you? Is that what you recall happening at the dinner table to your brother?
Yeah, it was much worse than he described, but it was bad.
Much worse for him?
Yes.
And was it ever that bad for you at the dinner table as it was for him?
No.
Did your father do the same kind of questioning of you in front of the mirror that he did of your brother at dinner?
Yes.
Do you remember your father ever making Lyle smack himself for giving wrong answers at dinner?
No.
Your Honor, could we have a break at this point?
All right, we'll take a recess. We'll resume at 20 minutes to
Oh,
the hour.
look at that
We'll
exhale.
discuss with the direct examination.
That was like, oh my God, you can see everything there. And when she asked for the break, and he's like, it's like, oh, thank God I get a break. Like, I mean, this is so difficult for him to go through. I mean, and it's understandable why. Oh my God. Okay, let's continue.
Examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, can you look to your right to the pictures of yourself that are on that board?
Uh-huh.
Can you see them?
Yes.
How old were you in those pictures?
Just in case, I'm taking them off the board.
I think I was
Okay.
10
These are
or
okay.
11.
You
Wait,
appear-
that's Hershey.
You appear to be playing tennis in the one on the bottom.
Yeah, that's
you know?
Hershey. It's got to be 12 or it's got to be
For
11.
anybody that's new joining on that hasn't seen every episode up to today, the reason why I am taking it off screen when they're showing photos is because there are some photos that they introduced that they showed on the same corkboard that are they are of Erik and Lyle individually without any clothes when they were little, like 5-6 years old little, and it's like them from the neck down. So there's those kind of photos that are here that were taken by Jose. Kitty had seen them. There's evidence that she had seen them because they were on the same roll as like birthday parties and other stuff that she had like written on the back of the photos. So it's like, anyway, but the you can see them all on court TV for yourself if you really feel like you need to see every single bit of this trial. I am not showing them publicly because I don't want my channel to get taken down for sharing that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm censoring that. It's I want to show as much of this trial as possible, but that's a very hard and fast limit that I'm doing. So anytime they show photos and I don't know exactly what they're going to show until they show it, I'm pulling it off the screen until I've been able to verify that it's not going to yeet my channel. Okay.
11 or 12 because Hershey didn't start till I was 11. I think that was the first time I ever played in Hershey.
So at the time those photographs of you were taken, you had already been raped by your father, had you not?
Yes.
And following that, did you make an effort to run away?
Yes.
And did that occur what time of year?
In the summer.
And was this a time when someone was visiting with your family for the summer?
Diane?
A relative?
Well, she was visiting more than just for the summer.
Okay. Who was visiting?
Diane.
And how did you try to run away?
I just went across the lake in a canoe and decided to leave.
Did you pack up some things?
I had a lunchbox and I had a little school book sack that I put some clothes in, and I filled the lunchbox with food.
And did you get away?
I got away for the all afternoon until nighttime when it started to get real dark, and there was a forest across not across the street, across the lake. And it was a real heavy, dense forest, and you could get lost, and I did.
And did somebody find you in the forest?
Yes, I heard my father calling after me.
And did he find you?
Yeah, I called after him.
Why'd you do that if you were trying to run away?
At that point, I was much more scared of being in the forest at night than running away.
And what happened? Did your father eventually come upon you?
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
I'm sorry, the video's lagging again. It's my internet. I'm sorry. I've got the Ethernet on, Wi-Fi's off. It happens. I'm really sorry about it. We'll just have to make do with what we can. Hopefully the audio is at least okay. That's because I feel like it's good to be able to obviously see the way that he's testifying and all that kind of stuff, but hearing him is also arguably more important.
He was furious.
And did he do anything to you?
Yes, he picked me up. I was sitting on the back of a tree. Well, my back was to the tree. I was sitting on the ground of it. And he picked me up and threw me against the tree and said, "If you ever run away, I'll kill you. Do you understand me? You'll never get away." And he just went on and on and on about how this was stupid and how this was ridiculous and how I was embarrassing him. And
Embarrassing him to whom?
Diane Vandermolen was in the house at the time, and he was more embarrassed that I had done this, and Diane would now realize that I tried to get away from the house than anything else.
Objection, speculation.
Overruled. The answer will stand.
Okay. Now, at this point in your life, after this effort to run away, did you resolve somehow to change something about the way you were dealing with your father?
Yeah,
And what was your resolution?
I decided to try to do something. I didn't know what to do. I thought about killing myself, really, and once I failed at that, I tried to just try to resist him in some way.
What do you mean you failed at killing yourself? Had you tried to kill yourself?
Yes,
What had you done?
I had just filled up the bathtub with water and broken over one of my dad's razors and just sat there looking at the razor in the water, but I wasn't able to do it.
Did your dad have straight razors?
Yes. No, what do you mean by straight razors? He had the ones that you...
So when you say you broke open a razor, you mean a razor blade?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He had one of those like 6-packs where you would throw out the blade and put in another blade.
Double-edged blade?
Yes.
Did you cut yourself?
No.
What had you resolved to do by way of fighting back?
I didn't really know what to do.
What did you do?
I hid from him. I put cinnamon in his drinks and his coffee and his tea.
Why did you put cinnamon in his drinks?
Well, at the time, I was in 7th grade, and I had a group of kids, friends of mine, that were really involved. No, they weren't involved, but they talked a lot about sex, and it made me very uncomfortable. So I would sort of shy away and just listen.
And what did you hear that led to putting cinnamon in your father's drinks, if anything?
I heard that it made it taste better.
It made what taste better?
His semen.
And so you did it so it would taste better?
Yes.
Now, was it at some point after you were 11 years old that you developed a rather peculiar eating habit?
Yes.
Did you think it was peculiar?
No.
Okay. That's my word.
Yes.
What did you do?
I used a lot of lemon in my food.
And what do you mean by used a lot of lemon? What are we talking about here?
Well, in essence, I would put the lemon in the bowl first and then put whatever I was going to put in the bowl, like fish or rice or whatever. Sometimes I'd just pour the lemon over the food if it was already on the plate. But otherwise, I would just drown my food in lemon.
All of your food?
Soup, the meat, chicken,
Overruled.
the fish, the rice, pretty much everything.
So would you consume a large quantity of lemon every week?
Every day.
And when you're eating all this lemon, did you notice it had any effect on your sense of taste?
Yes.
What would happen?
I wouldn't taste as much.
You wouldn't taste as much of your food?
I did it for a specific purpose, but it didn't seem to work all that well.
What was the purpose for which you were doing it?
So that I wouldn't have to taste my dad's.
Okay. Let me ask you something. Where did the lemon come from? Did you go and buy it for yourself?
Where the idea come from?
No. Where did the actual lemon that you're putting on everything come from?
Oh, from my mother.
And would your mother, did she ever run out of lemon?
Yes.
And would she be concerned about that?
Yes.
So did she make it a point of trying to always keep you supplied with lemon?
She kept stocks of lemon.
Did mother ever ask you why you were drowning all of your food in lemon?
No, it was a big joke in the family, and the relatives and so on, but no one ever asked me why.
She never asked you why.
No.
Objection.
Overruled.
Mr. Menendez, was there something about your father's demeanor or look during what you've called rough sex that was distinctive?
Yes.
And could you tell us what that was?
was the look in his eyes. It was the way he would look at me, through me, past me. I remember at one time he stuck me with a tack, and it really went far into me, and I sort of went, "Ugh," and he just twisted his head around and looked right through me, and it was scary.
Was that different than the way he looked at you when he was angry or when other kinds of sexual activity were going on?
Yes, it was like a glazed look. It was as if he wasn't there. It was as if he was, or didn't think I was there. It was really scary because I didn't know what he would do, because it's hard to describe. And on all the other occasions, he was just angry or he was nice. He was there. He was all there, and he was very bright. And I would sort of know what he was thinking. But in this time,
on these occasions, could you know what he was thinking?
I had no idea what he was thinking.
And why was that particularly scary?
Because of what he was doing.
Did you think on these occasions that he saw you differently? In other words,
I didn't even know if he saw me when he was in the middle of it. It just was really weird.
okay. Now, you've testified that this rough sex ended when the family moved to the house in Princeton.
Yes.
Do you know why it ended?
No.
And a few months after the family moved to Princeton, did the family move again to California?
Yes.
And was there something unusual with respect to your father and his molesting you that occurred after the family moved to California?
Well, it ended.
It ended, or it stopped for a while?
I had thought it ended, period. It turned out it didn't, but that's what I thought had happened. I thought it was because we moved to California. I was really excited about moving to California and getting out of the Princeton house, which was
Painful.
was a very depressing, sad house. And
No kidding.
and my mom was in that same state as well during that time.
Well, I don't understand you. Your mom was in what state?
She was very depressed, very sad
During what time?
in Princeton.
Could you back up from the mic? Just ignore it and stay back. We'll hear you. So you thought the move to California was going to be what?
I thought it was going to be like a new beginning. I thought it was going to change everything.
And you thought it was going to change the sex?
Yes.
And for how long in California, when you first got here, was there this stopping, this no sex with your dad? Do you understand the question?
For about 3.5 months. Once we were in California, for about 3.5 months.
You sure it was 3.5 and not 6, Mr. Menendez?
Well, it was 6 in total from when we were in Princeton too, but just in California it was 3.5 months.
So there was about 2.5 months in Princeton. There was no sex at all in the Princeton house?
There was sex. I know there was because I remember kneeling on the wooden floor, and the wooden floor was in my bedroom, but I don't remember very well about the Princeton house.
Okay, so was there a period when there was no sex in the Princeton house before you moved to California?
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Starting at the age of 6 and up until the point when the family moved to California, generally speaking, on average, how many sexual contacts a month was there between you and your father?
I didn't hear the first part of the question.
All right. Between the time you were 6, when it began, and the time that you were 15 and a half, moved to California, on
Almost 10
average, generally over that whole period, how many sexual contacts a month were there between yourself and your father?
2 to 4 times a month. I mean, that's really general.
So would there be some months when there'd be nothing?
Yes.
And would there be some months when there'd be a lot more?
No.
Well, so it would be
Some months there would be 4 times. Sometimes he'd come in every week. He'd come in every week, sometimes for a period of 5 weeks, and then not come in my room for 2 months.
okay. So we're trying to average it out, stretch it across that whole period.
Yeah.
2 to 4 times a month.
Yes.
So you get to California, and for the first 3.5 months, nothing.
Yes, nothing.
So what do you think?
I think that it was going to end. I thought it was because we moved to California and because I guess I was getting older and that it was going to end. It was
How'd that
really-
make you feel?
It felt great. I really had a good 3.5 months when I was there.
How was your mother doing in those 3.5 months, the first 3.5 months in California?
She wasn't doing so well.
Now, were you hearing things between your parents during these first months in California that was unlike anything you had heard them argue about in the past?
Well, I heard them talk about divorce.
And did you hear them talk about affair?
Oh, yes. I heard them talk about that in the car, basically through my mom. I heard them.
The question is, you're in California. Are you hearing these kinds of talks the first few months in California?
Yes.
Had you heard these kinds of talks about divorce, about affairs in New Jersey?
No.
And is your mother upset?
Oh, yes. She was very upset.
Was there a period of time when you first moved to California where your mother did a lot of crying?
She did almost.
Sustained. The answer's true.
Can you describe something that your mother was doing when you first came to California that was different than what she did in New Jersey?
Well, in
She was crying a lot.
in the Princeton house, she began to do a lot of crying, and I didn't know what it was from until I moved to California. And she did nothing but cry, and it was really sad. And I would try to go talk to her, and she would say, "Leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you." And she would just stay in her bedroom and cry.
Where?
Well, at first we were in the Oakwood apartments,
What state, Mr. Menendez?
California.
When you
Debbie Faison-Cook wants to know what was the objection. It was leading. So she was like, during this period of time, was your mother crying a lot? Basically daily. And it was, it was a leading question. Leslie has been leading a bit from time to time. And she's been largely getting away with it. I think you asked a question about this earlier. Yeah. She kind of has to lead him because of his disability. Would that be allowed legally? Like if there was a documentation about it, would the witness be allowed to help, be allowed a little more help? You'll see something like that often with a child testifying. Often the attorney that is doing a direct examination of like a young child, if for some reason they're testifying in a case, they'll give them more leeway at a time like that. But it's like for an adult, there really has to be something documented. For example, if special needs for some on some level, it would really have to be. I don't know if Erik would qualify in this kind of a case. It would have to be like a real like severe case, I would say. But then there's also questions about capacity to testify and all that kind of stuff. So, but it really, in a lot of cases, it really comes down to the attorney that is doing the direct examination coming up with a strategy for how to work with this person's disabilities. So yeah, let's put that trigger warning back up and let's continue with his testimony.
And you said she'd do nothing but cry. Are you talking about after you moved to California?
Yes and no. I mean, she did a lot of crying in the Princeton house. I just didn't know what it was for. But once we got to California, it was all crying.
Okay. And how did that make you feel?
Made me feel very sad for her.
But your
Yeah.
life was somewhat better at that point?
My life was great because the sex had ended, and I wasn't happy with my father, but I was happy, really, really happy that the sex had ended.
You weren't happy with your father because of what?
Because of the way he was dealing with my mother.
Now, at some point, did this stoppage, or did this period where there was no sex with your father end?
Yes.
And do you remember when that was?
was right before my birthday in 1980. I guess it was 1986,
And your birthday is when?
November 27th,
And Mr. Menendez, when did the family move to California?
in August.
Of 1986?
Yes.
And without getting into the details, what form of sexual contact did you have with your father right before your birthday in 1986?
Knees.
And was knees the most frequent form of sexual contact over the years from 11 on?
Yes, much more so in California, but yes, in New Jersey, I'd have to say it was the most frequent that I remember.
And did knees remain the most frequent form of contact for the years that you lived in California?
Yes.
And had what you call sex been the least frequent form of contact when you were living in New Jersey?
Yes.
And did sex continue to be the least frequent form when you lived in California?
Oh, yes.
I want to ask you to go to an incident, however, of sex that involved your father using a knife. You've referred to this before. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
Really quick, I want to answer this question here. Sophie1518 wants to know, can you testify if you have Down syndrome or something similar? Not all mental disabilities are the same. I would say that having Down syndrome is not on its own a bar to being able to testify. I think the court would go through a process of voir dire, or voir dire if you're in Texas state court, and then to basically figure out if this person has capacity. Like any medical diagnosis on its own is not, as far as I understand it, is not on its own a bar to being able to testify. It might be something that would trigger a questioning of the witness to make sure that they understand what it is that they're doing by testifying, to show that they have capacity. Yeah. That's about it. Nico Kiski, how rare would it be to have a child testify, say a kid under 12 years old? I mean, kids will testify. I mean, I don't know, maybe Rob is a better person, Law and Lumber, to ask about this, because, you know, he does a lot of trials that are involving, you know, custody disputes and things like that, you know, family law. I would imagine that in that area of law, it's fairly common. I don't know how common though, because, you know, when you're below a certain age, I would say not 12, but maybe younger, below, you know, the ability to understand things that are going on, it can be diminished because of just, you know, brain development at various ages. But, you know, 10, 11 years old, I think that there are times when a child like around, you know, 9 years old, that children can understand, they can observe certain things and they can report on certain things that they've observed. It really depends on the circumstances of the trial, how necessary their testimony is, you know, how old they are, how old they were when the things happened. Like all of that can really shape these kinds of things. So yeah, and yeah, as Draco Amy points out, she says, I saw a case recently with children testifying and they had to ask the child, do you understand what lying is? It was strange to watch. Yes, you have to go through all those kinds of questions to make sure that they understand, you know, various aspects of truth, of lying, of imagination, and you know, things like that, so that you can make sure that what they're saying, what they're testifying to, is properly admitted as evidence. And Debbie Faison Cook, if you're a minor and you get called as a witness, can your parents refuse? I don't think so, because, you know, for example, in paternity cases, you know, you know, like parental disputes between who gets custody, not paternity cases, but custody cases. There's bound to be at least one parent that refuses to have a child testify. So I don't think you can, unless maybe under some circumstances, but not others. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I'll be honest about it. I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think so. Okay. All right. Let's continue on here.
First, can you tell us how old you were when that occurred?
I was 17
And where were you living?
in the Calabasas house.
And your brother, was he even in California at that time? If you remember.
I don't really remember if he was. I think he may have been.
Did you have your own suite of rooms in the Calabasas house?
I had 2 rooms.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
And did this incident with your father start out with him having a knife, or did the knife evolve?
It didn't start out with him having a knife.
Okay. How did it start out?
It started out with him coming in my bedroom and telling me to get on my knees. I was on the bed at the time.
And that was fairly common, wasn't it?
Yes.
And did you do it?
No.
What did you do?
I got up, and as I was getting up, I said no.
And did you give him a reason for saying no?
No. I just said no.
Did you say you had a headache?
I don't remember saying I had a headache.
Do you remember telling me in the past that you thought you told him you had a headache then?
Overall.
What I remember now is all I remember.
Okay. So you just said no. Do you know why you said no?
Yes.
Why did you say no?
Because I had been building myself up for a long time before then. I'd really been building myself up to resist him in some way or fight back. I really hated myself at the time, and I disliked who I was. And so I just had to, I wanted to do more than say no, but all I could do was say no.
Okay. So you said no because you had been planning on saying no. Is that the answer?
Yes.
All right. And how did he react to your saying no?
Oh, he hit me and threw me on the bed.
Okay. And after he did that, what did he do?
He left the room.
And what did you think when he left the room?
I didn't know.
Did you think your resistance had worked at that point?
No, because he stormed out of that room.
So what happened next?
He came back with the knife.
Now, this knife, Mr. Menendez, is a small, medium, large?
I think it's like that.
Ooh.
It's
Yeah.
not bigger. I mean, I remember it being huge.
Okay. And where was it kept at that house?
It was in my parents' bedroom.
And when he came back with the knife, what did he do with it, if anything?
He put it on my neck. He put his hand on my head and put the knife on my neck.
Oh my God.
And did he hurt you with it?
No.
Did he threaten you with it?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said I should kill you, and next time I will.
And did you believe him?
Yes.
And following that, did he then demand an act of sex from you? Your Honor, may we approach? Did he then demand something from you?
Yes.
What?
Sex.
And did you comply?
Yes.
Did you complain?
No.
Did you resist?
No.
Did you say no?
No.
Did you just do it?
Yes.
And had he on this occasion requested that you go into a particular position that was unusual?
Yes.
And what was unusual about it?
It was that I put my knees on the edge of the bed.
Well, hadn't he asked you to do that before?
Yes, but it was unusual. It only happened 3 times in my life.
Was there a mirror in this room, Mr. Menendez?
Yes.
And were you positioned in some way with respect to the mirror?
Yes.
And is that what was unusual about this as well?
That only happened twice in my life.
Well, was this one of the times that happened?
Yes.
And did he make you look?
Yes.
And how did you feel about that experience afterwards?
Horrible.
I really hated myself.
And did you feel that you would be resisting him again in the future?
No.
Was there a thought that would go through your mind when your father was having sex with you concerning dying?
Yes.
What was that thought? And I'm focusing now on when you were in California, when you were a teenager.
I just wanted more than anything else that when I died, that no one would find out that this was happening to me.
When these sexual things were happening with your father, did you think that you might die?
Yes.
Did you understand how or why?
No, I just felt like I was going to die. It just was so horrible that I wanted to die, and I felt like I was going to die. I just didn't want to die with anyone knowing.
You didn't want to die in the middle of it.
No.
Is that what you meant?
Yes. I definitely did not want to die in the middle of it.
And if you had died in the middle of it, what might happen?
People would know
People would know what?
that I was having sex with my father.
Did any of that thought enter your mind on Sunday night, August 20th, 1989?
Yes.
And how did it enter your mind that night?
I thought he was going to kill me that night, and I thought he was going to have sex with me first.
And did that flash to any previous thoughts you had had?
Any what?
Previous thoughts. Thoughts you had had earlier in
Well,
your
it was a
life.
thought.
Okay. When you were thinking that your father might have sex with you on the night of August 20th and kill you, okay, did that remind you of these earlier thoughts you had about not wanting to die in the middle of a sex act with your father?
No, it didn't have to remind me. It was always in my head. It was always there.
Well, was it there then, Mr. Menendez?
Yes, it was there.
Let's go back, if we can, to when you're living in New Jersey. Do you remember? Let me strike that. Did you have an opportunity in the last few months to look over your school records from the Princeton Day School?
Yes.
And did you read the comments that all your teachers had written about you over those years?
Yes.
And was there something that you remember experiencing as a school child at school related to what was happening at home?
Certainly.
What were you experiencing at school? And when I say related to happening at home, I mean to the sexual activity with your father. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And what would happen at school?
I would lose my concentration, and I would wander off.
And were you aware of doing it at the time?
Sometimes I was aware when I snapped out of it.
And what would be the thought or thoughts or pictures or images that would cause you to lose your concentration?
Anything could cause me to lose my concentration. The way somebody looked at me reminded me of my father, or what somebody was wearing, if my father had been wearing that, or a box, the way it was positioned, anything, didn't matter.
But was it related to the sex with your father?
Yes.
And when you reviewed the school records, did you see things in those records that reminded you of these concentration problems?
Well, it talked about it all over the school records.
Back up a little.
I
Who
saw
talked about it?
my teachers.
What did they say?
They said that I had a serious problem in concentrating during tests, during class, school, and at any time, that I wouldn't be able to concentrate very well, that I would get very nervous and anxious.
Well, weren't you a pretty nervous, anxious person since the time you were a little boy?
Yes, I was.
And did this sex with your father, you think, make you calmer and more relaxed? And
Definitely not. It didn't make me more nervous for school. It just made me real paranoid
paranoid of what?
of giving myself away.
And Do you remember when you were living in New Jersey, practicing tennis and playing in matches and having concentration problems?
Yes.
And were any of those concentration problems related to, in your mind, in your memory, the sex with your father?
Yes, that's what they related to.
Do you remember hearing here various teachers and coaches talking about you spacing out?
Yes.
Did you know when you were younger that you spaced out?
Yes.
And is that the same as the concentration problems, or is that different?
That's what he was talking about.
Mr. Menendez, in your family, who is in charge of the sports and who is in charge of the school as far as you were concerned? As far as your life was concerned?
Well, my mom drove me every place in the sports, but she definitely controlled the school.
Okay, you have to back up because every other word now. She drove you to the sports, but who was in charge of deciding what the sports training would be, what sports you'd be involved in?
My father.
And in talking about your mother, what was her involvement with your learning process? If you understand the question.
Yeah, she would basically train me in school.
She trained you in the school?
No,
Or,
about schoolwork.
okay. Your mother was a school teacher once upon a time, wasn't she?
Yes.
Is that what she had wanted to be?
No.
Did she tell you what she had wanted to be?
Yes.
What had she wanted to be?
She wanted to be something in communications, like a radio anchor or an anchor woman or something like that.
Did she want to have a career in the entertainment industry?
Yes.
Did she ever talk about wanting to be an actress or a model or anything like that?
Sometimes, but mostly she wanted to do. She was a very good speaker, and so that's what she wanted to do.
When she would train you in schoolwork, where would this take place?
In the dining room.
And you heard your brother describe an incident that he observed, or incidents that he observed, where she would grab papers away from you and tear them up?
Yes.
Would she do that?
Oh, yes.
And what would make her do that as far as you knew?
Me not getting the right score on the test, she would sometimes time me or sometimes have me do handwriting tests, usually timing or papers that I was going to turn in for school. And if she didn't like the way I did them, she would sometimes just rip them up.
Let's separate two things. Is there a difference between your mother training you in schoolwork with her own materials and tests that she'd give you and your homework that your teachers were assigning?
Yes.
Did she work with you on both?
Yes.
Let's focus on the homework first, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Did she supervise your homework?
Yes.
Did she on occasion do your homework?
Yes.
Did your father do your homework?
Sometimes.
The Spanish homework, for example.
Yes.
You heard Ms. Sharp testify that there was stuff being turned in that was very different than what was going on in class.
Yes. He
Who
would
was
do this.
who was doing that?
My father.
And throughout your school career and in reading those comments, is it frequent that teachers have noticed that what was coming in from the home, essays particularly, was very different than your work on tests?
Well, it wasn't my work, so I think they noticed. I think they even commented to me sometimes about, they would do it in a sarcastic way about, your work at home is so good. Too bad you can't do that in class.
Now, was this by your choice that your parents were doing your work at home?
No, my mother had a program set where I had to turn in all of my writing assignments to her the day before.
And then she would do what?
She would look at them, go over them, correct them, and tell me how to rewrite them.
So she would change them. Is that right?
Yes.
And what you would turn in would be whose work?
My mom's.
Only hers?
Well, I would written the original paper, and then she had crossed out probably about half of it usually, and then rewritten.
Now, if you, in working on these assignments with her, if you'd rewrite them and you gave it to her and she didn't think you did it right or it wasn't good enough, what would she do?
She'd put me in the closet. She'd do that a lot more times than that, though.
We haven't gotten to the closet yet. What would she do with respect to the paper itself?
She would rip it up and throw it in the air and say, "You got to do this over. This is terrible. You're never going to embarrass me like this," and turn it in.
Oh, jeez.
Now now that would be on homework assignments from school.
Ones that she thought were unrepairable.
Let's turn to the training stuff, though. She gave you tests that she had
Yes.
obtained,
Yeah, they were like SAT form tests.
and were some of them reading comprehension type tests?
Yes.
And would she drill you in those tests?
Yeah, she had a stopwatch, and I would sit down and do the test. And sometimes she'd sit across from me. Sometimes she'd walk around me. Sometimes she'd go into the kitchen holding the watch. She'd hold it like this, and I would have to do the reading test.
And what would happen at the end of the tests?
Well, she'd grade it, and I usually didn't do very well in those.
And what would she say?
She would tell me what a stupid kid I was and what a rotten job I had done, and this was just about how bad I had done.
Just more emotional
Were there
abuse.
any experiences that you can remember where your mother was doing schoolwork with you that wasn't with her angry or critical?
No.
None.
When she was doing schoolwork or time tests, no, she always got angry.
Did she ever find the work that you did satisfactory or acceptable or good?
Once in a while. I'd always have corrections, but once in a while, I did it okay enough to pass in her eyes.
But was she still critical?
On the mistakes that I did, yes.
Let me go back for a moment to something we touched on before. You've now testified to a fair amount of the activities between yourself and your father concerning sex. Is that right?
No.
Well, you've testified about a lot of it, have you not? Never mind, I'll withdraw the question. Let's turn back to Friday before your parents were killed, okay?
Yes.
Did you tell your brother some of the details that you've told us here today?
Yes.
Particularly the stuff having to do with pain and stuff. Did you tell him that?
Yes.
What types of details do you remember, if you remember, telling Lyle about on Friday on the drive south?
I told him about the oral massages. I told him about the rough sex with the pins and the needles. I don't know if I told him about the knife. I told him about the knife when he threatened it at my throat. I told him about a lot of the threats that Dad had told me.
Okay. You said you don't know if you told him about the knife, and then you said you told him about the knife at your throat. What do you mean?
The knife during the rough sex.
The kitchen knife.
Yes.
The Rambo knife is not a kitchen knife.
No.
And why did you tell him those details out of all the details about your sexual activities with your father?
Because I was trying to explain to him why Dad had reacted the way he did. I
don't understand. What do you mean?
Lyle was questioning me about when it started, how it went on, and what happened in it. I wanted to convey to him probably why Dad was so upset and so willing for us to die rather than have this information released on Friday versus not. And so I was just telling him some of the things that used to happen.
Were you also trying to explain to him why you didn't or couldn't stop it?
Well, I explained to that, but that wasn't due to the rough sex.
Well, wasn't that due, however, to the threats and the fear?
Yes.
And wasn't rough sex scary?
Yes, that was very scary.
Were you trying to tell him the things that you thought were the weirdest?
Yes.
Your Honor, this would be a good place to stop for the day.
All right, we'll be in recess until tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Again,
I
to
thought
the
there was
jurors,
few
don't
more
discuss
minutes
this
at least.
case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, rough day. Really, really rough day in the testimony. Let me get through some questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Flash fan 85. I'm sorry, I missed this earlier. I had saved it and then I looked over. I overlooked it, I should say. Off topic question for much later. Do jury murder trials work differently than murder trials heard only by a judge? The only difference is you've got the judge is both the finder of law and the finder of fact. So, you present everything the same way. You've got the same rules of evidence. You've got the same structure to the trial. Everything else is the same. The judge basically just goes back and makes a decision. So it's a lot to put on one person for a decision. But there are some reasons why, why for some cases that might be beneficial. Debbie Faison Cook says she kind of has to lead him because of his. Oh, sorry, I already asked that question. Or I answered that question, I should say. Let's see. Sophie 1518. Is it allowed for judges to preside over the same case after a mistrial? If yes, why? And if no, why? It is allowed. It is allowed. The reason really I think has more to do with the practicalities of effective administration. When you have the same judge presiding over both trials, theoretically you've got institutional knowledge. The case that the judge is very familiar with the case, obviously, and if you have a good judge, if you have someone who is a fair judge, they will preside over the case fairly in both the first and the second one. There are a lot of questions about this judge in particular. Judge Weisberg had been on the prosecution. He had been a DA before he became a judge. Very common in a lot of with a lot of judges. A lot of them have a history of being a prosecutor. That does not on its own mean that they are biased in favor of the prosecution. I mean, there are plenty of former prosecutors who are on YouTube that will comment on cases, and they'll talk about how in some cases the defense should win. Emily D. Baker is an example of that. Nate the lawyer is another one. And then there are sometimes where defense attorneys that are on YouTube also will talk about how someone absolutely deserves to be locked away. So that doesn't necessarily mean that a judge is automatically impartial. But there are reasons outside of that a lot of people will bring up about Judge Weisberg that indicate that he may have had some bias. I haven't looked into that really in depth myself, so I'm not ready to have an opinion on that question. But I'm just noting that there are people out there that bring up that particular allegation. Debbie Faison Cook, are both juries in the courtroom or only Erik's? I think it's both. I think so. Not fully certain. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it is. Pretty sure is, and I think it's both. Okay, so that is about it. Like I said, this is a really heavy day, very heavy day. I think that with that we can where is hang on a second. Oh, there it is. Okay. We are definitely deserving of a little bit of a palate cleanse. Thanks again to Draco Amy for providing that. I'm gonna do it one more time because it's super cute. I love it. I love it. We've got Indy, we've got Holmes, we've got Astra. So all right, folks. And Indy's not on screen, so I'll take the Indy cam off. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for going through this journey with me. It helps to go through it with some friends. This has been a particularly rough day of testimony, and something tells me that that's not going to get much easier as as Erik's testimony progresses, and particularly when we eventually get to cross-examination. Oh boy. Take care of yourselves. Do what you need to do. Hug some fur buddies or some fur babies, or a significant other. Do something to sort of like not have to carry this with you for the rest of your day. This is like I said, some very, very heavy stuff. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones. If you are walking away from this feeling very sad and disheartened, the world can be a sad place sometimes, but we can always do something to make it a little bit brighter. So if you are feeling particularly despondent, do one thing kind for someone else, particularly someone who is unable to pay you back for it, whether that's another animal or a human being or what have you. Do something that can make this world just a little bit brighter. That's my recommendation. Thank you to everybody for joining, whether you are in chat or lurking or on replay and in the comments. I appreciate every single one of you for joining me. And thank you again, of course. Special shout out to the mods for helping with all the discussion. Oftentimes we've got people that will agree and disagree. And I love the fact that, for the most part, everybody does so very, very respectfully. So I do appreciate all of that. That's what we want to see in our community. We don't need everybody to agree, but we just want everybody to treat other people with opposing opinions with the respect that every human being deserves. So, and I love seeing that in the chat. All right, guys, that for me about does it. Oh, look, Indy came back. She came back for the very end to grace us. Let me see here. Let's show the Indy bear. There she is. Hey, puppers. Good girl. All righty. Okay. And with that, I guess that's our send off. Keep an eye out for the day 3 recap for the love triangle murder case. That'll be coming out today, and then we're going to continue on with day 4. It's going on right now. So, and keep an eye out for closing arguments in that case as well, which we will be live streaming. Otherwise, members, we've got members only live stream on Friday, and otherwise I'll see you guys on Monday for the next classic trials. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful